This is the story of a girl who was born into a poor family and married a poor man. But how she transformed her life will amaze you. This story is especially for girls and young people who become disappointed with life and don't try to change themselves. This story can change your life, so be sure to read it to the end. So let's begin today's story. How can I describe the daily life of a laborer? Prosperous people can never understand it. They say that only the place where a fire burns knows its heat. I too opened my eyes in a laborer's home, where children were abundant. I had 4 brothers whom my father put to work at a young age. One was placed at a baker's shop, another handed over to a workshop owner to learn a skill as an apprentice. One was entrusted to a shepherd, and another was put to work with my father hauling sand and gravel. My father did this out of necessity with his weak, delicate boys. Naturally, a laborer couldn't feed his 8 children alone with just his 2 hands. My father was uneducated, so he didn't send any of his children to school. However, he did arrange for all of us sisters to learn the Holy Quran. The woman who taught Quran at home was our neighbor, who knew a little bit of reading and writing. Seeing my passion for learning, she taught me the Urdu primer and 3rd grade books. Thus, I became able to read and write. Our house was small, a 4-marla house, and such a large family. When my eldest sister turned 17, she was married off. The young man she married was also uneducated and a laborer. It's true that a laborer's daughter would find a laborer's match. However, my parents felt at peace that their daughter was settled in her own home. My other sisters did embroidery and frame work. I was the 3rd in line. My eldest sister was very happy in her home despite the poverty. She hadn't dreamed unrealistic dreams about the future. She had gone to her in-laws' house with a heart full of patience and contentment from her father's home, which is why her husband's 2-room brick house felt like paradise compared to the small room at her father's house. 2 years later, my second sister was married. She also took the wealth of patience as her dowry. Her husband also sold vegetables at the market. He had a good income. His in-laws were good-natured people, so she was happy in her home. My match was arranged by an acquaintance. The family members included 2 sisters-in-law, 1 brother-in-law, 1 elder brother-in-law, and my mother-in-law. My father-in-law was not John. The sisters-in-law were younger. This boy also worked as a laborer. After careful consideration, my marriage was also fixed. My elder brother's wedding and mine took place with a day's gap. Like my sisters, I was content with my parents' wishes. My husband John was a good man, and his family were also good people. For 15 days after the wedding, John didn't go to work. On the 16th day, I asked him, "You stay at home. Why don't you go to work?" He said, "When do I ever find work? If you go out, no one will call you for work." At my insistence, he went to work for 2 days. At night, he would bring some money to me and some to his mother. I felt that my happiness was complete today, but this happiness was temporary. After that, John often stayed at home. My brother-in-law regularly went to work. He earned well, and the household ran on his earnings. I believed that a woman also has her own destiny. My sister's husband was also a laborer, but he didn't sit at home. which is why he earned something every day. His daily sustenance continued without any hindrance. She was happy in her home, but due to John's laziness, I also had to endure taunts about being a freeloader. All this was because of John. If he had earned, I wouldn't have been humiliated by the younger ones. A year and a quarter after the marriage, the situation worsened after the birth of my daughter. I needed money for her upbringing as well. In winter, even the essential things for this tiny life were not available, and the result was that she fell ill. She had caught a severe cold. I didn't even have money for her treatment. My family came to see my daughter. They saw my condition. The child was struggling to breathe. It was then that my mother asked me to come with her. How could I stay at my in-laws' house with the child without treatment? So I went with them. For the first time, I told my family about my plight at my in-laws' house. My father said, "Daughter, until your husband goes to work, you will stay here." The child needed treatment. I couldn't let her die while 3 weeks passed, and John came to pick me up. My family put their demand before him, and John promised that he would go to work. I returned home with them. John kept his promise for a few days and went to work, but then the same excuse came up. I can't find work. Those whose bones are not accustomed to hard work find every task a hardship. This time, when I was very financially distressed and dependent on my brother-in-law, I came back to my parents' house. I ate for 2 months. Now, my younger sister's wedding was approaching, and my parents needed money for that too, while they were already very poor. After much thought, I decided that instead of being a burden on them, I would work hard myself and support myself and my daughter. I agreed to work at a prosperous family's house a short distance from my home. They were old acquaintances of my father. They gave me breakfast and lunch and other necessities. I earned enough to cover my and my daughter's expenses. Now, John began to miss his daughter. He came after me again and insisted I come with him. I refused, saying that I was managing well here with my own hard work and was also spared the taunts of my mother-in-law and sisters-in-law. I also wanted to convince my husband that this is the place of a lazy man in society. When 2 years passed, John didn't improve. Instead, he became even more useless. My child was growing up. When John's family saw that there was no chance of my returning, they found a girl from a respectable family who had passed matriculation and taught in a private school. My elder brother-in-law and brother-in-law thought that since Emma hadn't returned, they would marry John to this widow's daughter. The poor widow needed support, and her daughter was employed. When they talked about John's second marriage, my husband refused. He loved his daughter, even though she had stayed with him for only a few days. John refused the second marriage. When this news reached me, I thought, if he is refusing a second marriage because of the child, why am I rejecting John? After all, he is the father of my child. It's better to try and bring him on the right path. I couldn't stay at my maternal home forever. In Reggiani, this was my brother's house. Today or tomorrow, I had to leave here. My daughter wasn't under her father's protection. If John divorced me, both of them would be deprived of one parent. I didn't want to make John feel useless and end up ruining myself and my child. I contacted my husband first and told him that I was willing to return on the condition that he allow me to work in someone else's house so that I wouldn't be dependent on him for money. My elder brother-in-law did not give permission and strictly forbade me from working in anyone's house. Finally, I told John to come to our side because we wouldn't be able to manage without his earnings. He agreed to my suggestion and came to our house, leaving his brothers. He agreed because he himself was dependent on his brothers. There was a small room on the roof of my father's house where extra items were stored. I cleaned it, and we started living there. Now, my husband would take care of the child, and I started working in 2 houses instead of 1. After some time, when discussions about my second brother's marriage began, I thought, after all, I can stay at my maternal home with my children for some time, but not forever. If I don't think about the harsh Johnny now and make some arrangements, tomorrow the attitude of my brothers and sisters-in-law will change. My husband and I won't receive respect, and such attitudes will have a bad effect on my daughter's mind, while her uncles, aunts, and their children won't look at her with respect and esteem. My eldest sister-in-law still looks at me sharply. I worked in people's houses. There, I joined a committee, a rotating savings and credit association. For 2 years, I didn't take the money from these committees, and when my husband found a 4-mile plot of land being sold cheaply, I took the money from my committees and bought that plot through them. However, I didn't have the means to build a single room on it. I consulted my brothers. They took John with them, and now my husband started going to work with my brothers. In the evening, I also set up a communal oven bad near his house. Now, I didn't spend a single penny of my salary, some of John's wages and some from making rotis at the tandoor provided us with enough money to get by. When we had enough money to build 2 rooms on the plot, John and my labor brothers together built 2 rooms themselves. My 4 brothers collectively paid for the boundary wall, thus providing us with a shelter over our heads. When I moved into my 4-Marla house, my son William was born there. It wasn't possible for me to go to work, leaving both children at home. Moreover, the expenses had increased with William's birth. Now, I would leave the child with my mother and go to work. My husband found a job at a workshop. After a few days, unfortunately, he had an accident. His hand got caught in the machine, and he became disabled from an accident. Along with that, he became severely ill and bedridden, managing the burden of 2 children with an ill and disabled life partner, and providing for the daily bread of 4 people was very difficult for a weak and lonely woman like me to take care of a patient. You needed to be with them all the time. How could I go to work? This was a very tough time. It was a test of my life. I was facing severe mental and financial problems, which made me mentally ill myself. Now, I started to consider myself unlucky. My sisters' marriages were in poor families, but they were peaceful, while I was constantly fighting with problems. What had I even seen in life? All I wished for was 2 meals a day and a small house. These are the basic human needs without which one cannot live. My brothers weren't moneylenders. They were also laborers, poor souls. How long would they help me? Now, I was disappointed with life and tired of living, so I started thinking about suicide. My husband's weak body lay on the bed like a corpse. The children would go to my mother's house for food. My sister-in-law, I don't know with what heart, would put boiled rice or a single roti on a plate in front of them. Sometimes we would go hungry. If my mother got a chance, she would come and give me food. Now, I started to feel exhausted and debilitated. I lost interest in everything, neither my husband nor my children. One day, lying on the charpai, looking at my circumstances, I was wishing for death. I opened my eyes and prayed, "Oh, Allah, grant me such a sleep that these eyes never open again." At that very moment, my mother brought my children inside the house, and she herself went back outside. The children came inside playing. Perhaps the children hadn't received food from their grandmother's house today, and they immediately started asking for food. The raw rice and lentils that my mother had given 2 days ago had been cooked and fed to John. Now, there wasn't a single grain of food in the house. I myself was hungry. What could I feed the children? My daughter kept calling me and asking for roti. When I didn't respond, she became worried and started crying loudly. Seeing her, William also started crying. I remained deaf. Meanwhile, William climbed onto the kitchen table, perhaps in search of something to eat. He was opening a box when his foot slipped, and he fell to the ground with a thud. There was a utensil placed in front of him, whose edge hit his forehead, and blood started flowing. His heart-wrenching screams made me get up. He had a very severe injury. Blood was flowing from his forehead and nose. My mother had sent the children home early because my sister-in-law had fought with my mother. This was the result of my few moments of heedlessness that my son was injured. If I had died, if my prayer had been answered somehow, what would have happened to my children? This is what Allah had shown me. Why was I disappointed and hopeless with my Lord's mercy thinking this? I asked forgiveness from my Lord, repented, and hugged both of them. I cried for a long time. A little while ago, I had thought against John, but now I started thinking with sympathy that whatever he is the father of my children. He didn't leave me, so now that he is disabled, how can I leave him? It was then that I decided that no matter what the circumstances, I would put my trust in Allah and change these circumstances with my own courage, because no one else can change anyone's circumstances. In such a situation, prayer to Allah and one's own courage are what help. It was not possible for me to work in people's houses, but where I used to work, they were still willing to help me. I went to their house and asked for some money on loan. They gave me this money. The communal oven was still set up near my house. At night, women from the entire neighborhood started coming to me to have rotis made. Thus, I would get rotis and money daily, and also started getting flour. But this was not enough. John still needed treatment. The wound was still fresh. He could neither work nor regain his strength. Due to weakness, he couldn't even get up. While lighting the fire in the communal oven and making rotis at the tandoor, my mind was occupied in another direction. What could I do to improve my household's circumstances? I now started setting up the tandoor in the afternoon as well, because I needed to do more work. My mother's house was in a populated area, while my house was a little away from their house, where the population was sparse. There was a large number of nomads here. Often, lost travelers would come this way. There was neither a tea stall nor a hotel near the house. The market was also far away, and there was only 1 or 2 shops nearby. Neither the communal oven nor the tandoor could satisfy me, although all the families in the surroundings, due to the summer, used to get rotis from me instead of making them at home. And nomads would also come and say, "It would be even better if you started selling cooked lentil, and roti meals. I started thinking about this. Then I thought of another method. I would cook breakfast in the morning and keep it near the tandoor. People would come to buy potato curry and chickpea and rice dishes. I also started making parathas with ghee. They also eagerly started buying tea and parathas for breakfast. My income began to increase day by day. However, I must say that if God hadn't supported me, I wouldn't have succeeded in any work. My Lord was supporting me, and I worked day and night sitting near the stove. My business grew so much that I started to feel what a blessing it would be to have a small hotel. But as a woman, I could become a cook, but I couldn't open a tea shop alone. People liked my food and requested potato and cauliflower parathas from me. Tanvir's health was improving, but he couldn't do strenuous work. I pleaded with my elder brother to build a room for me on the roof, so I could live there and open a roadside eatery, dhaba, or hotel downstairs, where people could sit and eat and drink. At first, my brother considered this idea impossible and incorrect. Then, my two younger brothers supported my proposal, so they jointly built a room and a bathroom for me upstairs. I vacated the downstairs room, spread mats in both rooms, set up tablecloths for floor seating, and placed a cot and a few chairs and tables in the courtyard. Thus, my dhaba opened. John's job was to sit at the counter and take money, and my job was to cook upstairs. We hired a poor boy who would bring food and drinks downstairs for customers and wash the dirty dishes and bring them upstairs to me. After some time, things got better. We converted the dhaba into a hotel. John was the owner of this hotel. My children started studying in the best schools in the city. We bought a beautiful mansion in the city. Thus, we moved from a life of poverty to a life of wealth. I confess that I have learned a lot from the sorrows of my life. I made some wrong and some right decisions, endured some suffering, but never despaired of God's remembrance. That great power also didn't leave me. Rather, when I worked with courage, it held my hand. When a person burns in the fire of sorrows, they become more refined. If I had despaired and given up, my family would have scattered, and my children would have been severely neglected or forced to work at a young age, and my dream of educating them would have remained unfulfilled. Today, thank God, my children have completed their education. William holds a good position in a government institution, and my daughter is also a teacher in a government school. That's why at no point in life should you lose courage or despair, but keep trying and keep thanking Allah.